Good morning. We are here today to discuss Parshas Chayei, and the title for today's class is Intentional Living. Intentional living, living with intention. I'm going to share a fascinating medrash about our forefather Avraham, and another possible title for this class could have been The Power of Davening. This month, the month of Cheshvan, is sponsored by David and Sarah Shakron and family for the merit of the continuing success of Klal Yisrael to fulfill its mission to bring light and wisdom to the entire world. This week's class is dedicated also in honor of the birth of a baby girl to Rabbi and Mrs Wolnerman. MAZAL TOV to the entire Mishpacha. Well, we're living in difficult times, as we all know. Everything going on still in Gaza and the various threats that continue to plague the state of Israel, in addition to which we have more and more discomfort here in the United States of America regarding anti-Semitism, having just elected a mayor to New York City that is questionable at best and probably much more difficult than that. And a question I was asked recently at an event this past Shabbos, the Shabbaton in the Yachad Kollel in Los Angeles, question that I was asked is, do I think that Jews have more than 20 years in the United States of America? Now, it is difficult. We see what's happening for many years now on the extreme left, and we see what's happening now on the extreme right. And there's no question that we have much cause for concern. And as far as I can tell, many more Jews are feeling less and less safe in many places. And that question of where are the Jews going to be safe is always a question. We all suffer from the PTSD of the Holocaust, of the need to be aware and to possibly run away, although increasingly it's much less likely to find a place that is completely safe because of everything happening in the world. But what I would like to point out is that, in my humble opinion, the question of where will Jews be safe is not the right question for Jews to be asking. A much more important question than where will Jews be safe, even though one would think that existential survival is the most important question, I would argue that we have a much more significant question that we need to ask, and that is, what are we doing about our Jewish mission? Where can we fulfill our mission? Where can I fulfill my mission? And so, in line with this idea that a more important question than asking where will Jews be safe is, what is our Jewish mission? Where can I fulfill it? How do I go about it? In line with all of that thinking, I want to posit that our forefather Avraham Avinu, who is again a very major focus of the Parsha, this week being Parshas Chayei, that our forefather Avraham Avinu is the most significant person to have ever lived. And it kind of begs the question, he's so important, and everything he did in his life was so incredibly impactful. And it's for this reason that we have more than half of the world population at least claiming to be monotheists. Yet the opening of the Parsha talks about how he bought a field from a man named Ephron of the people of Ches, and the Torah goes through many sentences describing that story. And the question is, why is that such an important story? What is so important about that story? Now, in about a minute or two, I'm going to share with you several reasons that Ramban cites as the reasons why this Parsha of buying the burial plot from Ephron, what we call the Cave of Machpelah in Hebron, why that's so important. But before I do that, I want to share with you a medrash that is right at the start of our Parsha, a Midrash Tanchuma, which I found to be quite interesting. And I just want to share it with everybody, and we're going to discuss that too in the context of understanding the significance of Abraham buying this burial plot. So in our Parsha, after the story of buying the burial plot, the Ma'aras Machpelah, the Torah says, and Avraham was old, coming along in days, and Hashem blessed Avraham with everything. And that's when Abraham instructs his servant Eliezer to go find a wife for Yitzchak from his homeland and from his family. So that's the concept that Abraham was old, and then Abraham instructs Eliezer to look for a wife. So the Midrash Tanchuma, the first one in the Parsha, says, and Abraham was old. The rabbis have taught us. Let's say a person is riding a donkey, and now it's time to daven. So while a person is riding along on his donkey, comes the time for tefillah, which means Shemona Esrei, and in general, intense prayer. What should he do? What is a person supposed to do if he's riding his donkey and it's time to daven? So this is what our rabbis taught us. If a person is riding on a donkey and the time for davening has come, he should go down. Meaning, he should go down in order to daven what we would say like a mensch, daven properly. However, if he's not able to go down, you know why? Because his mind is not settled upon him, right? For example, he's got money on the donkey and he's just worried what's going to happen with the money, or he's afraid of robbers in general, or people that might bother him or molest him. Then a person should davening while he's riding on his donkey, because a person needs to have a settled mind. Rabbi Yochanan said this teaches us that when a person davens, they need to have a settled mind and daven in front of Hashem. So the Medrash is saying that as important as it is to daven, it's absolutely critical to have a settled mind to daven in front of Hashem. So then Abba Shaul he comments. Abba Shaul says if a person has intention when he's davening, he can feel confident that his prayer will be answered. As opposed to, I don't know, many of us, when we're davening, we might be thinking about a lot of other things. But a person who's really able to concentrate when they're davening, he can have confidence that his tefillah is being heard. And there was no person that had proper kavanah in his heart and his mind in davening, for davening, like our forefather Avraham Avinu. Our forefather Avraham, he was the one, a paragon example of a person who had proper heart and mind concentration. He said in front of Hashem, when it came to the story of Sodom, Hashem, heaven forbid that this should be what you do to destroy righteous people with wicked people. God forbid. That's what Avraham davened. Once Hashem saw that Avraham was looking for a merit, he was looking for a plausible excuse to prevent Hashem from destroying Sodom and Gomorrah, from wreaking havoc in this world, from causing destruction in this world. That's what Avraham was seeking. Hashem began to praise Avraham and say to him, you are the best of people. You are Yafisa mi b'nei Adam. You have shown yourself to be the best from all mankind. So Avraham said to Hashem, where exactly do you see that I'm different than everyone else? In fact, when me and my son go into a city, people can't even tell the difference who's the father and who's the son. I'm not recognizable. So as much as you're telling me that I am somehow more significant or better, in a literal sense, it's even prettier, looking better than other people, when people see me and my son Yitzchak, or maybe it's also Yishmael, doesn't really identify which son, says people can't tell the difference between a father and a child. Because a person at that time would live 100 or 200 years old, and he would not look any older. A person was not aging at that time. Avram said, Master of the world, you need to make a distinction between a father and a child, and between a youngster and an older person, so that the elder person will have a recognition of having honor and being more dignified because he's older than the youngster. So Hashem said to him, I'm going to start with you. And that's why it says that Avraham was old, because Avram went to sleep that night. He got up in the morning and he saw in the morning that his hair and his beard had become white. And he said to Hashem, you've made me an example. And Hashem said, yes, I've given you the crown of old age and the shine of elderly people. And that's why the Torah says Abraham was older. So this is a really interesting midrash, because basically the midrash is saying that Avraham was being praised by Hashem when he davened to save Sodom, how he's better than other people because he's concerned that Hashem should not bring destruction to the world. And Avram said, if I'm better, why do I look the same as my son? Meaning, you can't tell that there's anything different about me. And then Hashem says, okay, then we're going to make you look older. And he does. So the obvious question is, what's this whole concept that because a person concentrates in davening, and Avraham was concentrating in davening, he was better, and now he looks old, as a sign of significance? Well, what's really the kind of thread in the Medrash that's somehow giving us insight into what our Parsha is discussing, that Avraham was an old man or an older person in the context of his ability to concentrate, to have his mind settled, and to daven with such tremendous concentration. And because of that, he somehow becomes distinguished from other people. What is really the message of this medrash? Doesn't seem to correlate that a person concentrates in davening, and so now he should look older. So I'd like to go back to the first question that we raised on the Parsha and give the reasons that I mentioned. So the question is, why is it that the Torah spends so much time and wording on the purchase of the burial plot that Avraham buys from Ephron, from the people of Ches, in order to bury his wife Sarah? What is so significant about that? So the Ramban posits a few different reasons as the reasons why this is so important. He then mentions two from the Ibn Ezra that he does not like. But for our purposes, we're just going to say that there are 5 reasons that we see discussed. So one, says the Ramban, is that the Torah is trying to tell us the great chesed that Hashem does with Avraham. Because in this Parsha, we find that although Avraham is a stranger in this land, and he says, I'm a stranger and just a dweller with you, right? Nonetheless, he was given the opportunity to buy the property because Hashem was looking out for him, and Hashem allowed him this ability to purchase the land, even though he was really a stranger among these people, and they were willing to give him this burial plot. Also, you see in this Parsha how kind Hashem is to Avram. Everybody calls him a master. He's seen as a master or a prince of Hashem, Nisi Elokim, Ata B'Sochenu. People are calling him master. People are referring to him as the prince of Hashem. And also that Abraham was made famous in his own lifetime, which is a promise Hashem said to Abraham at the beginning of Parshas Lech Lecha, V'agad L'Shem Mecha, I'm going to make your name great. We see over here that he did, in fact, become famous in his lifetime, and that we also see he gets the benefit of being able to bury Sarah, his wife, in the land of his inheritance. So all of this is one reason, says the Ramban, the Torah is trying to tell us of the great chesed that Hashem did for Avraham in his lifetime. So that's one reason. Second reason, says the Ramban, that the Torah wants to make it very clear where the burial place of the forefathers is located. And so the Torah wants to make a big deal about it, to highlight the place of the burial of the foremothers, you mean our ancestors. That's the second reason. And the third reason is that we should know what a major test it was that here his wife died at an early time, earlier than expected. And obviously that's a tragedy, and he was not prepared. And the fact that it was so much negotiation necessary for him to bury his wife, that was considered a major test. So the Torah is going out of its way to tell us another test that Avraham underwent and passed without complaining, so to speak, with flying colors. Now, the Ibn Ezra mentions 2 other reasons. One is, so this would be reason number 4, is that the Torah is emphasizing the very special nature of Eretz Yisrael, and how Eretz Yisrael, where Avraham is seeking to bury Sarah, is not only good for living people, Eretz Yisrael is good for the dead people as well, because that's why it's so important to Avraham to bury his wife there because Eretz Yisrael is a really important place, not only for living people, for also for people who have passed on. Of course, we know that there are many people that have the custom of, or do their best that as much as they can to get buried in Eretz Yisrael. And then the last reason, which is the second reason of the Ibn Ezra, is that this is an indication that Abraham was inheriting Eretz Yisrael because he was able to get this land. Now, those are the 5 reasons. As I mentioned, Ramban does not like the Ibn Ezra's reasons. He feels that, this is where Sarah was living, so obviously it would make sense for Avram to bury her there. This doesn't really tell us that Eretz Yisrael is good for people who have passed away. And also the fact that Avram would inherit Eretz Yisrael, he bought this land, it doesn't really seem to be that it's in his inheritance at this point. And in fact, we know that it was really the children that inherited the land. So Ramban does not love Ibn Ezra's answers, but really for our purposes, we're going to come back to highlight why I think there's a deeper layer as to why all of these reasons are significant. But the main question is, what is so important about this story that the Torah goes into such detail about it? And so those are reasons given in the Rishonim. So that's overall question on the Parsha number 1. Why is this such an important story in the Torah? Question number 2 is, as we mentioned, that the Medrash points out, is right after this story, the Torah tells us that Abraham got old, and his getting old leads to the fact that he now tells Eliezer, hey, look, go marry Yitzchak by finding a wife for him in his homeland. And then the Torah goes on to a humongous narration of the details of Eliezer looking for a wife for Yitzchak. And a related question is not only why do we have so many details about that, but also why is it that Yitzchak is such a non-player in that story? And that really brings up a third point, but we can ask this as question 2A and 2B. Why is Yitzchak not a factor in his own marriage? He's 40 years old, as opposed to Esau, for example, who when he's 40 years old, he goes and marries wives on his own. His parents are not involved. As opposed to Yitzchak, when it's time, to Yaakov, when it's time for him to get married, his parents tell him where to go, but it's all up to him to take care of it. So over here also, even if we say that Yitzchak was not supposed to leave Eretz Yisrael, Avram should tell Yitzchak, listen, go figure out what to do about getting married. I think you should go get someone from my land, but you can't go. So you be involved with Eliezer and instruct him, etc. We also find that even at this point, Avram gave all of his possessions to Yitzchak. But the way the Torah gives us the information is that Avraham is making all the moves. Avraham is deciding everything. Rivka just gets presented to Yitzchak later, and he marries her. Why is Yitzchak such a non-factor in his own marriage? That would be 2A. And 2B is Yitzchak is not mentioned in the burial of Sarah. Not that he was there, not that he participated, not that he eulogized, not that he cried, nothing. It's all about what Avraham did. Why is Yitzchak such a non-factor in the story? And in fact, a new friend that I met in Los Angeles, his name is Mr. Golcha, that I met over Shabbos, he actually kind of grabbed my shirt and he says, where's Yitzchak in this story? And I was impressed with his passion and his intensity, and it's definitely a great question. And that's what we're coming to deal with. So what I'd like to suggest is, if we go back to the Medrash that we started with, there's an amazing thing that the Medrash is telling us here about the uniqueness of Avraham. And the way the Midrash phrases it is that nobody concentrated and had his heart and his mind with intense concentration and settled like Avraham. And Hashem even points that out to Avraham and says, you are literally better than all people. And then that leads to Avraham looking older than Yitzchak and old age being introduced in the world. What is going on with this Medrash? But it's very clearly saying that Avraham was unique in the way that he davened. Why? Why was Avraham unique in the way that he davened? Why did he have so much concentration? And what is the Medrash telling us about the significance about a person's mind being settled? Now, I just want to mention that the concepts that we're about to talk about, which I mentioned one of them in the title, which is intentional living, and the idea of being settled in your mind and being present in your activities, this is new wave wisdom, or a lot of people talk about the importance of a person being present in the activities that they do, being very much focused and centered in where your feet are rather than having your mind in other places. And a lot of people talk about the intentionality of living and having a plan. But as we are learning, and we constantly learn, the Torah is the root of all wisdom, and the Torah actually teaches us both these concepts very, very clearly about the most significant person to ever live. That's my humble opinion, a fair characterization of Avraham Avinu, and it's telling us that he embodied these characteristics. Why? What was it about the paradigm, about the philosophy of Avraham Avinu that leads to him having this incredible focus, this incredible intentionality, and a settled mind? And I believe the answer is actually relatively simple, but extremely important to absorb. And that is that, as we know, the Talmud tells us that until the years where Avraham Avinu was spreading the message of Hashem and helping people to transform with the sentence that souls they made in Haran, the first 2,000 years of the world are called nothingness and void. That means that for the first 2,000 years of the world, until Avraham Avinu came upon the scene, in a very realistic definition of world history, those 2,000 years were immaterial. They were like nothingness, like nothing significant happened. And then with the advent of Avraham Avinu, that begins the years of the Torah. So he's the one who instigates the years of the Torah, which is the most significant thing of all time. Why? Because Avraham Avinu's worldview is that not only is there one God, Hashem, and not only is that one God, Hashem, the creator of the world and the mover and doer of all things from the inception, but that the creation of a human being is the most significant thing that Hashem created, because human beings have the capacity to be infinite, and that means they have the ultimate significance, the ultimate importance. God created people to achieve the incredible feat of infinity, but what that really means is that they are fundamentally, permanently important. So that means that the contribution to existence of a human being is unparalleled in creation. This is the paradigm of Avraham Avinu. Human beings have permanent importance, and he totally buys into that. And it's for that reason he is the human being that most greatly impacts the world for all time. He's the beginning of the years of the Torah. He's the beginning of all the religions that subscribe to monotheism. He is the beginning of permanent importance of a human being. And that's also an underlying basis for his passion for chesed. It's not just that he wants to be nice to people. It's so important to be good to people because people are so important. And that's a way to inspire people with chesed. People are not charity cases. People are treasures to be appreciated because they are so significant and important. So when Hashem says to Avram, I'm going to destroy Sodom, Avram says, no, you can't destroy people. We need people. People are so important. Isn't there some righteous people that we can save, and that this city can be saved, and all the people can be saved? Isn't that possible? Aren't people so important? Don't we need every one of them? And Hashem says to him, you're better than all people if you understand that. Now, one of the incredible things that Avraham Avinu does, that the Medrash is telling us, is that he concentrates more than all other people in his davening. Because Avraham Avinu knows that his significance, Abraham's significance, as Hashem's partner in the world, means that he has a major role to play, and that it's up to him, on some level, it's up to him if the people of Sodom are going to live or die. And he invests himself fully in that process to determine how can he be the best partner with Hashem in the creation of the world, but also not only the creation of the world, also the development of the world. So he takes responsibility by davening with all of his concentration and intensity to save the people of Sodom. Now, here's something fascinating that I literally did not realize until this morning. We learn from Avraham Avinu that there is this idea of davening shachris. And the place that we learn this from is because after the city of Sodom and all the cities were destroyed, it says that Avraham woke up early to the place where he had stood earlier, meaning the place where he had originally stood to daven for the people of Sodom. Now, I would think if we're learning davening from Avraham, we should learn it from the first time that the Torah very clearly says that he davened, which was the day before, right? When he was praying for the salvation of the people of Sodom. I don't know if it was the day before, 2 days before, whatever it was. The bottom line is we would think that, I guess it was it must have been the day before. But anyways, we would think that we should learn out the davening from the first time that he davened, not the second time. But you see, a lot of people daven for a lot of things because they really, really want them. And then they kind of forget about them. Because even if we really, really want them, well, they either happen or they don't happen. But let's say we daven, as we sometimes do, for a refuah shlema for people. But are we calling them often and finding out, are they feeling better? Are they improving? Or do we just feel like, hey, look, we did our part because we daven, and davening is so important. It's true that davening is so important. But if you really, really care, you look to see what were the results of my davening and what do I need to do now? And that's why we learn it from the second time of Avraham davening. Because as much as he intensely negotiated with Hashem, and he didn't get an answer from Hashem, all that he heard from Hashem is, okay, 50, 45, 40, okay, if there are 10, then that's also fine. And then Hashem leaves and Avram leaves. But what happens? What happens next? So because Avraham really cares about what he's davening for, and he takes responsibility for it, so then what he does is he finds out, okay, what happened later? And so what's coming out is that Avraham Avinu becomes the most significant person of all time because he, more than anyone, fully internalizes the significance of Hashem creating human beings and the permanent importance that they have. And therefore, his concentration is absolute because the most significant part of a human being's ability to create is in his mind. And when we say that a person needs to be able to concentrate when they daven, it's not only because, hey, it's not nice, you're talking to Hashem and you're not thinking. No, it's because the power of the human mind is so strong that whatever is worth doing with all of your mind, with all of your passion, with all of your concentration. Especially davening, because that's where the partnership of Hashem really becomes more formed and is more at work in working together with Hashem. Of course, what we do is also in partnership with Hashem, but a humongous aspect of that is in the partnership when we put our mind together in front of Hashem, davening to Hashem and interacting and encountering Hashem. That is a huge part of that partnership, and therefore it requires tremendous concentration and intensity. And so therefore the Medrash is telling us a major lesson about Avraham in our Parsha that we see from the fact that the Torah says that Avraham was old. Avraham understood that what Hashem is telling him is that it's not only that Avraham is important and that he's better than other people, but it's important that other people see that importance. It's critical that other people recognize that Avraham has that significance, because that teaches people what a human being can be. And so therefore, the reason that this Medrash is the opening of the Parsha, even though the Medrash talks later about earlier things that happened in the Parsha, is because the Torah is telling us over here that everything that we see about Avraham in this Parsha is Avraham creating the legacy and the importance of other people. So the reason that the Torah spends so much time and wording on the burial of Sarah is because Avraham is establishing the concrete importance of Sarah for all generations by making sure that the land is bought in a particular way, which we're going to explain in a minute. But that's why he's using his position as the leader of a world, which I'll also explain in a minute, and they refer to him as the Prince of God, that nobody would dare withhold their burial plot from him, because Abraham has become a world-class figure. He's become a global leader, and that's the basis of how he's buying this land, not for himself in order to be able to accomplish burying his wife, but for the creation of the enduring permanent legacy of Sarah, of his wife. Because if the purchase is so significant, that's because Sarah is so significant. And for a person like Avram Avinu, who realizes that everything in life we need to do with intentionality and to make sure that it has the effect that only we can create, that means that he is saying that this was true about Sarah as well, and that burying her is going to be a tremendously intentional act that's going to validate Sarah's tremendous significance in this world. And so he is building a legacy for her, because Avraham Avinu understands that all human beings are so important, and it's so important for other people to understand human beings' importance. And so it's done in front of the whole city. It's done in a public way so that everybody should know how important this transaction is, because enshrining Sarah as a permanent fixture in Eretz Yisrael, in front of the people who are living there, so that all of her descendants know where she's buried, so that they see that her husband, who was the most significant person to ever live, is validating her significance, that becomes a mission of a significant person. A mission of a significant person is to validate the importance of other significant people. So now we understand that the 5 reasons that we mentioned, they're all a way of underscoring the major significance that Avram Avinu has, and because of that, the major importance that Sarah has, and the importance of showing people how important people are. So, for example, the Ramban says Hashem wanted to show the kindnesses to Avram Avinu. He was called the Prince of Hashem. People were calling him Master, meaning the non-Jewish people were calling him Master, right? He was made famous in his lifetime, and his wife was buried in the land that Hashem promised him, that even though he hadn't yet inherited it, like, the Ramban says about the Ibn Ezra, yeah, he had not yet inherited it. That's true. But it's the inheritance land that Abraham is saying, this land is so important. I'm going to make it mine now, because this land is so important. And to make known the burial place of the forefathers, because we have to know what our legacy is, and we have a legacy of tremendous significance, and that this was also a major test. The fact that even though he was so important, so significant, and that Hashem had promised him everything, and he still needed to go buy the land, of course that's a major test, but that's what Jewish people are meant to do, is pass the major tests, because that is what makes the people significant, is the hardship and the pain that we go through to do the right thing. All of this contributes tremendously to the idea that human beings are significant, and that we create lasting legacies, and that all people need to know that human beings are significant. And that's why the chesed of Abraham is so great. And the other final reason, which is the Ibn Ezra's first reason, is that the eminence, the superior quality of Eretz Yisrael is not only for people that are living, is for people that are dead. Because even when we're dead, the people who are important are forever important. It's a forever significant contribution that we've made to the world. And Eretz Yisrael is the place that highlights that more than anywhere, because, of course, that's where we achieve that unique relationship with Hashem, and that's where all of our tefillos, all of our prayers are directed, because that's where the greatest partnership for Hashem actually takes place. Now, the Medrash goes on to say over here that at the funeral, Avraham Avinu said the Eshes Chayil, and he praised Sarah with the Eshes Chayil. And our dear friend Sabi Behar actually did this at the funeral of his first wife, and it was very, very moving. And the Eshes Chayil is all about recognizing the accomplishments of a great woman. So, for example, I'll just share with you a couple how it correlates to our foremother Sarah. Eshes Chayil this woman of valor is the crown of her husband is a way that the Mishlei the sentence in Mishlei 12 says it. She's the crown of her husband because this is what Avraham was bewailing about his wife Sarah. And Avram began to cry and say, "Look, who can find this woman of valor? That her husband, batach ba lev bala, her husband heart has confidence in her." Avraham had total confidence in Sarah. He trusted her to say, "He's my brother," or that she's my sister, and she went along with that story. He had total trust in Sarah and their partnership. Also, she was good to him all the days of her life. She was constantly good to him. Everything that she did, that's the MAZAL TOV. She only did good for Avraham. And an example of that is that she proffered her maid Hagar to be a wife for him so that Avraham would have a child, because Hashem had promised Avraham to have children, right? Another example is, it says, Darshat Semeru Fishtim, that she sought the wool and the linen. She sought out, Darsha means to investigate, and she was able to tell the difference between the wool and the linen, says the Medrash. She was able to tell the difference between Yitzchak and Ishmael. And then there are many other things I'm not going to go into now that the Medrash talks about in the context of the Eishes Chayil, that it's really referring to Sarah. Now, at the time that all this was happening, it might not be so easy to see the great things that Sarah was doing, or the fact that it would have major generations for all time impacts, but they did. They did. And that's the power of the significance of a person. So at this point, when now it's time to bury Sarah, Avraham's mission is to establish the incredible, concrete achievements of Sarah, to make her an enduring legacy. And that is Avraham's job. That is not Yitzchak's job. Of course, Yitzchak was there, and of course, Yitzchak participated, and of course, Yitzchak cried. We find out later in the Torah that Yitzchak was in mourning all the years after Sarah died until he finally married Rivka. Yitzchak was incredibly in love, enraptured, and tied into his mother Sarah, but it wasn't Yitzchak's job to clarify and to establish the significance of his mother Sarah. That was Avraham's job. And in a similar fashion, it was Avraham's job to establish the legacy of his offspring Yitzchak and what would become the Jewish people by Avraham orchestrating that it's the people of his family that Avraham needs to negotiate with, that it needs to be a message from Avraham that this is my choice to marry Yitzchak to a member of my family of origin, because Avraham is the one that has to establish the enduring significance of the Jewish people. So it's not that Yitzchak couldn't, and it's not that Yitzchak doesn't care, and it's not that Yitzchak doesn't have the ability, right? It's simply that this is Avraham's job to establish the important legacy and concrete significance of the people that are closest to him, because that's what Avraham does. There was nobody that davened like Avraham. There was nobody that did chesed like Avraham. There is nobody that pioneered and established the future of the world like Avraham. And that is a tremendous appreciation that we need to have of our forefather Avraham Avinu. And we also need to understand that that's our Jewish mission. Just like Avraham Avinu influenced the entire world, and he made it clear that there's only one God, and he fought a world war against the four kings to establish the correct type of monarchy should exist in the world. He established the five kings over the four kings to make sure that he was getting rid of all the dictators of the world, all the despots of the world, all the people with global world domination ambitions. And instead, Avraham reestablished a world order that would provide, that could be many nations of the world that we need to unify under the umbrella of the seven mitzvahs of Noach. And he taught the whole people of the world of the creation of Hashem of the world, that Hashem is the creator. That's why he established that Eshel in Be'er Sheva, which, by the way, the commentaries say that after the Akedah, which was the end of last week's Parsha, Avraham goes to Be'er Sheva, and it's in Be'er Sheva apparently that he hears that Sarah died. At least that's the way the rabbis learn, that Rashi brings. That means that after the Akedah, instead of going home to Sarah, he's going to tell the whole world about the significance of Hashem, the significance of what just happened at the Akedah, how all the nations of the world are going to be blessed through Yitzchak, which is what it says. At the end, it says literally the second to last sentence towards the end of the Akedah says that all the nations of the world, through your children, everybody's going to be blessed. He goes back to Be'er Sheva because that's where he established the inn. That's where he established the place of learning that would be the place that the whole world would recognize that the nations of the world are significant. Needs to be through the lens of Avraham and Yitzchak, and that relationship that was established with Avraham and Yitzchak being partners with Hashem in the world. He was going back to teach everybody that. And then he gets called that Sarah has died. So that's why Avraham is coming from Be'er Sheva, because the next major step in helping the world to understand what the world needs to achieve is to recognize the permanent legacy of Sarah and all that she accomplished in her life, and ultimately to establish a wife for Yitzchak, which will then lead to the formation of the Jewish people. And that's what we need to know today. We need to know today that as Jews, we have this unbelievable mission from Hashem that was started with Avraham Avinu. We're supposed to change the world for the better. We're supposed to inform the world of the truth of not only the existence of Hashem, but how every human being matters. And we're supposed to do it with a settled mind. And we're supposed to do it with tremendous concentration. And we're supposed to do it through tremendous power of davening. And we're supposed to do it by always, always keeping in mind that that's the Jewish mission. And we can achieve it. Just like Avraham Avinu achieved it, we can achieve it. Whether you have the extreme right, or you have the extreme left, or you have all the problems in the world with all the axis of terror that was largely beaten down, but still clearly exists in way too many important ways. We have the ability to make it all what it's supposed to be, because all the nations of the world will be blessed through us, through the partnership that we have with Hashem. But what's so critically important is that we understand the power of our minds. We should understand the significance. We should understand the significance of older people that have had experience and that they've learned, and they've learned from the previous generations, and that they can help direct us and guide us based on what they've already learned and what they've already accomplished. So there needs to be a distinction between the old people and the younger people. The younger people sound often like they have these great new ideas. They might be good, but they need to be filtered through the lens of age-old wisdom. That's what has to happen. We need to know that distinction between older people and younger people. We need to always be looking at the people around us and validating their significance. That's what Avraham Avinu does for Sarah. That's what he does for Yitzchak. And because of that, it became clear to the rest of the world also. And that's how you create a lasting and widespread impact in the world that, God willing, will endure and allow us to achieve our Jewish mission. So instead of being worried about where it's safe in the world, we need to be worried about, are we accomplishing our mission in the world? And what's our mission in the world? Just take it right out of Parshas Chayei and Lech Lecha. What Avraham did in the world was completely change the world for the better and establish a foundation that the world can always rest upon, which is the Creator, and the fact that the partners of Hashem in creation are the Jewish people, and that through that all the nations of the world will thrive and prosper, be fully blessed, but only if us, as his descendants, understand the significance that we have and the legacies that we need to build. And we put our minds where our feet are, and we fully concentrate, and we live with intention to make sure that we're bringing about these great results, just like Avraham Avinu. Any questions or comments?
Thanks, Akiva. You can't see me because it's the Uber thing, but I'm here.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
See you next week.
See you
All
next
right. Goodbye,
week.
everybody. Yeah, bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Thank you all. Have a great day, everybody.